Hi folks, it's the FPL General here with episode 17 of my 59th minute FPL podcast, recording on Tuesday the 23rd of October. The train wreck of Game Week 9 is behind us and we're looking ahead now to Game Week 10. So, took a bit of a break from the podcasting over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think the last one was ahead of Game Week 8. To cane or not to cane, that was the last episode, so I decided not to cane in the end up, and that worked out pretty well. I've taken a break from the podcasting, and I've also gathered a bit of feedback from listeners as well during the international break about the podcast, so tried a few new features and things like that over the last couple of episodes, and I listened back to a few of those episodes during the break as well, and I've decided I'm kind of going to go back to the way it was beforehand. A lot of people wanted me to bring back the watch list feature, which I'm going to do. I just felt some of the recent podcasts were a bit, tipping differentials and players to avoid and stuff like that. So I want to kind of ramble on a little bit more about how I play the game and things like that, rather than just tipping X player and Y player. So hopefully this episode will be better than the last few episodes. As always, I'll start it with the shout-outs to those players who played 59 minutes in the most recent game week. I'll move into a Game Week 9 review. Then I'll move on to the watch list feature, so players I've added to my watch list after Game Week 9 and players I've removed. Then I'm bringing back the Twitter questions as well, so thanks to all who asked questions on Twitter. I've picked out 3 of the best ones, and I'll tackle those as well. Then I'll finish up with Game Week 10 captaincy and what I'm thinking about for my own transfers for Game Week 10. And then I'll just wrap up the pod with a couple of little things I want to mention before I go. So hopefully about half an hour all in all. So first up, shout out to Wolves striker Raul Jimenez, who played 59 minutes in Game Week 9 and got himself 1 FPL point. To disappoint his owners. So I know quite a few people have him, so they would have been disappointed to see him go off early. Obviously Wolves were pretty poor, and I think he had a long trip during the international break as well, playing for Mexico, so that was probably why he came off early. So he was the only player this week. That's his first 59-minute appearance of the season. I'm still waiting for Pascal Gross to make a return from injury, because he's on 2 59-minute appearances, and I'm hoping that he can get a hat-trick at some point, and then we can invite him onto the podcast, or just rename the podcast the Pascal Gross FPL pod. I want to give a mention as well to a player this week. Now he didn't play 59 minutes. He only played 12 minutes, and he played 15 minutes in game week 8. It's Aubameyang at Arsenal. 15 minutes and 12 minutes in his last 2 game weeks, and he scored 4 goals and he's got 1 assist. And he's got 6 bonus points in those 2 games as well. Just absolutely crazy numbers coming off the bench. I don't remember, I certainly, not in recent seasons, I can't remember a player doing that, coming off the bench and getting back-to-back massive hauls. So I don't know if maybe there are players out there that I'm not thinking of, and send me a tweet if there are. But I just thought he deserved a special mention this week for what he's done. Absolutely crazy, and very frustrating for people who maybe have sold him recently, because he hasn't been starting. Just nuts really. You can't really foresee that. So special shout out to Aubameyang, and I'll talk about him a little bit more later when it comes to the watch list. Moving into Game Week 9, I'm just getting my team up in front of me. So it was, as I mentioned, it was a train wreck of a game week. It was a good week to have a bad game week because the average was very low. Average was 43. I scored 42, so I was happy enough with that, considering some of the scores I've seen online. There's people getting less than 20 points in Game Week 9. It was absolutely bonkers, some of the scores. Just one of those game weeks we just forget about and move on. If you got through it with 40 to 50 points, you're doing well. For me, 42 points gave me a slight red arrow from 190k to 194k, so no damage done really. Just as I say, move on and look forward to Game Week 10 now. It was my first red arrow since playing the wild card in Game Week 5, so I had a bit of momentum going, and hopefully I'll get that back again now in Game Week 10. I'm sitting on 539 points overall now. I know some people like to hear points rather than rank to compare to their own maybe. My transfer for game week 9 was Holebas to Robertson, so that one worked out pretty well. Robertson got me 8 points. Trippier got me 6. Salah did the business, got 8 points, and Aguero captain got his goal, 12 points. Apart from that, 1s and 2s across the board, and I'm sure a lot of people had 1s and 2s, and Bennett even managed to get me a 0 as well. So 42 points, happy enough with that, and just move on to game week 10. Moving on to the watch list feature now. So as people know, I keep a watch list on the FPL website, which I update after each game week. After I've watched all the highlights and caught up on all the matches, I add players to it and I remove players. So I've got a bit of OCD and I like to keep it at 30 players. So I've got 30 players on my watch list at the moment. I'm not going to go through them all today. I'll talk about the ones I've added today and the ones I've removed today as well. So top of my watch list at the moment is Mendy, Man City. I had him earlier in the season and I got rid of him. I got rid of him for Trippier 3 weeks ago. So Trippier has brought in the points for 3 weeks for me now, which is great. But I want Mendy back now. So the big question I need to ask myself is, do I go Trippier back to Mendy, or do I go to 4 premium defenders? So Trippier, Mendy, Alonso and Robertson. It's something I'm thinking about. I'll talk about it a little bit more later in the podcast when it comes to my transfers, because it's going to dictate what I do this week. Mendy has 6 assists in 6 appearances this season. Just crazy figures for a defender, and when it comes to defenders, he is probably a must-have, and he's someone I want to get back in as soon as possible. Now I'm not too worried this week because they're playing Spurs, so I don't really foresee a clean sheet for Man City there. So I'm probably happy enough to keep Trippier this week and then maybe make the move Trippier to Mendy the following week. But again, I'll talk about it a little bit later. So Mendy's top of my watch list. Another player I added to the watch list today was Ozil. I watched Arsenal Leicester last night, and Ozil was he was a joy to watch last night. He was superb. And if he could do that on a more consistent basis, he'd be in a lot of FPL teams. 8.3 million. He's got 3 goals in 7 appearances this season, which is pretty good. The problem is he tends not to show up every week. He's got, gets these phantom injuries and illnesses and everything else. So we can't really rely on him. But hopefully now he can put those behind him and he can get a run of 4, 5, 6 games. And if he continues, if he can play like he did last night in all those games, I'll definitely be looking at him. So he's on my watch list now. I'm not going to bring him in this week or next week, but I'm going to be monitoring him closely to see how he performs and if he can play every week. That's the big one, really. Another Arsenal player I picked out last night was Bellerin. Obviously it didn't start well for him. He got an own goal, but then he racked up 2 assists, 5.4 million. I think that's 3 assists in his last 2 games now, so he bombs forward. He's a very good option as an attacking fullback. The issue is Arsenal are not keeping enough clean sheets for my liking. So I always want clean sheets and attacking potential from my defenders, and until I see Arsenal improving in regards to clean sheets, I'm not really interested in Bellerin. I think Leno in goal has made it, I think he's played well. So I know Holding's been playing centre back recently as well, so I still think they're probably a little bit weak defensively. So again, Bellerin, like Ozil, he's on my watch list. Probably not going to get him in this week or next week, but keeping a close eye to see if Arsenal can tighten things up. And the likes of Bellerin and Monreal, then I'll be interested in. 3 more players now I've added to the watch list today, and mainly because I brought in Knockaert 2 weeks ago, and now I'm already looking at moving him on because he got dropped. Got dropped in game week 9, so he's a rotation risk now. And in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have got him in the first place, because back then I was contemplating it was either Richarlison or Knockaert to bring in that week, and I went for Knockaert. I just had a gut feeling on him and brought him in, and it hasn't worked out. So I'm looking to move him on now. I don't like that he's rotation risk. There's a lot of options in the Brighton midfield. I would expect him to come back in for the home game week 10, but then I just don't want him going forward because, any given week he could find himself on the bench now. So 3 players I'm weighing up as possible replacements for Knockaert are Josh Murphy at Cardiff, Shirley at Fulham, and Pereira at Watford. So I recorded the Fulham Cardiff game at the weekend and I watched it back today to scout Murphy and Shirley in particular. And it was funny, I was actually watching the game to look at Shirley and Murphy, but Camarasa was actually the player that caught my eye the most, the budget midfielder, 4.5 million. I was surprised how attacking he played at the weekend. It almost looked like he was part of a front 3 when you would expect a 4.5 million midfielder to be more of a defensive option, like Højbjerg at Southampton and players like this. But Camarasa caught my eye. Gets into the box very, very often, takes corners, takes free kicks. So I think Camarasa will score plenty of FPL points. I think he'll take over, and he could even match Murphy, between now and Christmas, just going by that game that I watched today, Cardiff against Fulham. So Camarasa is on my watch list already. So Murphy's 4.8 million, so he's a little bit more expensive than Camarasa, and he does play a little bit further forward. He's on the shoulder of the last defender most of the time. There was a couple of occasions where he nearly got in behind, and obviously he got his goal. So he's got 2 goals in his last 3 games, and he has been impressive. And Cardiff do have a good run of fixtures as well, and Cardiff impressed me against Fulham. Fulham were awful. Mitrovic was just feeding off scraps up front, getting no service. And I would be slightly worried as a Mitrovic owner, having watched that game. Yes, Mitrovic is a great striker, but is he going to get enough service to do damage? So yeah, Fulham were awful. Cardiff were by far and away the better side and deserved all 3 points. I would expect, surely the Fulham manager is under severe pressure now. He already looks like a manager who's on the way out. When his post-match press conferences and things like that. So that's a worry as well. If Jukanovic does lose the job at Fulham, maybe whoever comes in might set them up more defensively, which might negatively impact Mitrovic as well. So I don't have Mitrovic. If I had him, I would keep him, but I probably wouldn't be bringing him in at the moment, having watched that game today. So Murphy, I like. Shirley as well. Shirley, I'd probably be more inclined to go for Shirley rather than Mitrovic at the moment, just because I've got Arnie up front and Aguero, who I'm happy with, and it's hard for me to get to Mitrovic from Danny Ings. So Shirley at 6 million, I can get him straight in for Knockaert. He's got 4 goals in 8 starts, so very impressive stats. And we know he shoots on sight. He's taken loads of goal attempts. And if you're taking lots of goal attempts, you're going to get goals. So I like Shirley for that reason. I like that he's greedy. He doesn't think twice about shooting. Superb goal he scored against Cardiff, from 30 yards out. It came out of nowhere, really, that goal, because Cardiff were on top at the time. I like Shirley. He took a direct free kick or 2 as well, which is a good sign for him as well. So Murphy and Shirley, I like both. But gut feeling, Pereira is the one I'm probably leaning towards out of all 3. Pereira's 6.2 million. He scored a superb goal at the weekend outside the left boot. He was hot earlier in the season, and then he went quiet when Watford's fixtures got a little bit tougher. But I think they've got a good run now. I'm just looking at them here. Watford have got Huddersfield, Newcastle, Southampton in the next 3. So it might be a good time to get back on Pereira now. Obviously, he's a superb footballer. And I just like him. I like him as a player, and I like the idea of owning him. So I'll talk about transfers later, but if I'm going to make just one move this week, it's probably going to be Knockaert to Pereira. That's if I had to make the moves today. Now, a lot can happen with Champions League and things like that, but I am getting the feels for Watford's Pereira. So that's the watch list covered for players that I've added this week. Just going to mention a few players that I've also removed, and a couple of reasons why. So the first one is Pogba. Pogba's been on my watch list because he plays for United. He's on penalties, so I was keeping an eye on him. But his last goal was in game week 2. I think he scored game week 1 and then he scored game week 2, and he hasn't found the back of the net since. So he's about 8.5. I don't even know what his price is. He's 8 point something anyway. So I'm not interested for that price when he's not scoring goals. Luke Shaw as well. I've removed him. I've been keeping an eye on Shaw because he's a nice price to get into the United defence. But I mean, 1 clean sheet in 9 games says it all. Really, you can't depend on the United defence this season. So I'm no longer interested in Luke Shaw until United shore things up at the back. Trent Alexander-Arnold is another player I've removed this week. I've got Robertson, but I've been keeping an eye on TAA as well. And I was considering a Liverpool double up in defence, but he's missed the last 2 games now, which I don't like. So there's Gomez, Alexander-Arnold and Lovren seem to be competing for 2 places. So that's just enough for me to avoid all 3 of those players now. So I think if I was going for a Liverpool double up now in defence, would have to be Robertson and the goalkeeper, or else Robertson and Van Dijk, just for nailedness. I just don't like the rotation risk now from the others. There was actually a question on Twitter from FPL Fraggle. His question was, do Alexander-Arnold owners, do they hold on to him or do they sell him? So if I owned Alexander-Arnold, I think I would give him 1 more week for the Cardiff game and just hope that he comes back in. I think there's a very good chance that he will come back in against Cardiff, having missed the last 2 games. Now, whether it's Gomez or Lovren to miss out, we don't know. But I think I would give him 1 more week. If you don't, you might have other issues to fight in your team. Maybe if you don't have any other issues, maybe now is a good time to get rid of Alexander-Arnold because he is rotation risk. But I would, if you've got a good player on the bench to come in if Alexander doesn't play, I would just give him the Cardiff game, and if he misses out again, then obviously just get rid of him. But he could do well against Cardiff if he starts. You would expect a clean sheet there and could get some attack in return. So Liverpool defence is a bit of a minefield now. Gomez has been superb this season. Anytime I've seen him, Lovren's played well, since he's come in. And Trent may just have to make do with a place on the bench now. He just may have lost his place due to the form of the other guys who've come in. So yeah, if you have him, I would probably just give him 1 more week. But if you don't have any other issues, then maybe you can move him on this week. So good question, Fraggle. 2 more players I've removed from the watch list. One is the young guy at Bournemouth, David Brooks. I think his first name's David. So he's been impressive this season. I think he scored 2 goals in his last 3 games. But I don't like Bournemouth's fixtures. I think they've got Fulham this weekend, but after that it gets tougher. And the thing I don't like about Brooks is he's come off early in his last 3 games. So he's come off in the 57th, 58th and 69th. So he was pretty close to a 59th minute shutout, but he just missed it. So he's gone from my watch list as well. I've got Fraser still on my watch list, but I probably wouldn't be bringing him in now. He's gone off the boil a little bit, and as I said, the fixtures for Bournemouth I don't really like. I mentioned Aubameyang at the start of the pod, and I've removed him from my watch list this week. Now that might sound crazy. He scored 4 goals in the last 2 game weeks. I don't think I've ever removed a player from my watch list who scored a brace, in the game week just gone. But Aubameyang's gone from my watch list now because I just simply can't justify paying big money for a striker who doesn't start every week. So you would like to think, given his performances the last 2 game weeks, that he would start for the next few games now, but we just don't know with Arsenal. So I'm not going to bring in a player just because he's got 4 goals in his last 2 games, because he might not start. He's not going to do that every week when he comes off the bench. So really he's just been an impact sub the last 2 game weeks, which is worrying. Obviously great for those who own them, but there's no way I'm bringing him in now until I see him starting 3 or 4 games. I'd still be more likely to go for Lacazette. Very frustrating last night for Lacazette owners. He had quite a few chances. He missed a glorious chance he should have scored. So on another day it would have been Lacazette getting the brace. So if I have Lacazette, I'd stick with him, and I wouldn't be getting Aubameyang in. I just don't like him because he doesn't start every week. So that's the watch list covered. So I'll do that every week on the pod. I'll talk about the players I've added, and I'll talk about the players I've removed. I think that's better than, mentioning 3 players I want and differentials and things like that. I think it gives you more of an idea of the players I'm interested in and how I play the game. Moving on to Twitter questions now. So I've picked out 3. I'll try and get back to the other ones on Twitter before the deadline as well. There was quite a few. But I've picked out 3 that cover some of the main talking points this week. So the first one was from FPL Trophy. His question was about Anthony Martial. So is Martial now worth consideration? Martial is 7.3 million and he scored 13 points and 15 points in his last 2 game weeks. So very impressive figures. He started the last 3 games, so should we now be looking at the United man? My answer to the question is I'm not interested in Martial, and the reason is he's never been consistent enough for me when it comes to FPL. He has these big holes in him, but he doesn't do it consistently enough. And the other thing about Martial is we know he's had issues with Mourinho in the past, so he's only ever one poor performance away from being dropped again. So I think it's important to note as well that he has started the last 3 games, but Sanchez and Lingard have also missed, haven't started the last 3 games. So there is a lot of competition there for places for Martial as well. You would like to think now, given his form over the last 2 or 3 weeks, that he should keep his place, but I always have that fear about Martial that he is just one performance away from being dropped again by Mourinho, because Mourinho's ruthless. And we know he's had issues with Martial before. So for me, it just feels like chasing points with Martial. I would rather get a player who's nailed on, the likes of Richarlison, Sigurdsson or Madison, those kind of players, even Pereira at Watford, rather than Martial, because to me it just feels like a player you bring in and you're probably going to end up having to get rid of him again in a couple of weeks' time. So to me that seems like a bit of a waste of a transfer. So Martial has got, he's got 28 points in the last 2 game weeks, and he's only got 32 points overall this season. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about Martial. All of his points have come in the last 2 game weeks. So for me, it's a no on Martial. I just don't know what's going on with Sanchez. I don't know. Has he done something to Mourinho? Is it just he's not performing? I don't know. It's not that long ago he was the top scorer in FPL. 2 seasons ago I think he was top scorer in FPL playing for Arsenal, and now he can't even get in the United team. So it's a shame to see, but hopefully he can get back in, and do what start doing what we know he can do. But Sanchez is just too expensive anyway, playing in a United team for FPL. Next question is from Ruslan Zulfagarov. Hopefully I haven't done too badly with your name there, Ruslan. Ruslan's asking about my view on double Liverpool defence. So if I was going double Liverpool defence, which players would I go for? I've kind of mentioned this already. So if I was going double Liverpool defence, it would be Robertson, number 1, and probably Alisson, number 2. So I think Robertson, Van Dijk as well. You could go that way. Maybe we'll see Van Dijk get an attack and return soon. I had Van Dijk towards the end of last season, and he didn't get me any attack and returns. And he's gone 9 game weeks now without any as well. So we could be waiting a long time for Van Dijk to score a goal. He seems to score them all in the cup competitions. So yeah, my answer would be Robertson and Alisson for a Liverpool defensive double up. Last question is from Old Gold 80. His question was, if I had to go with 3 Liverpool and 3 City players for the rest of the season, who would they be? So a very good question. So if I had to pick a team now and make no transfers for the rest of the season, which City and Liverpool players would I get in? For Man City, it would be Mendy, KDB and Aguero. Now I think a lot of people would probably answer that question differently. I know a lot of people, I was listening to FPL podcast today, and they had a similar question about Man City, and neither of them mentioned Aguero in this kind of question. They were going with 2 City midfielders instead. But for me, I've owned Aguero from the start, and I'm happy to keep him, even if he does only play 60-65 minutes. I'd rather have a 65-minute Aguero, more so than a lot of 90-minute strikers. We've seen it the weekend again. He could have easily had a hat-trick before he was taken off. He missed a glorious chance, open goal. It might have been offside, I don't know, I need to see it again, but he had a header as well, gilt-edged chance that he put wide. So Aguero's getting the chances, even if he is only playing 60 minutes, and I'm happy to hold him. So that would be my 3 City. Mendy's the must-have, I think. Aguero I'm happy to hold on to. And long-term in midfield, KDB is the one I'd like, because he'll probably be the most nailed on, between now and the end of the season. I am a big fan of David Silva as well. I sold him a few weeks ago, so it hurt to see him hauling in game week 9. When he plays, he's going to be involved. So, but I think I would just edge to KDB if it was for the rest of the season. For the 3 Liverpool, it would be Robertson, Alisson and Mo Salah. So I was going to put Mane in there, but I've put Alisson instead, because if you're going to have Mendy, KDB and Aguero, budget wise you're not really going to be able to fit Mane in. So 3 Liverpool would be Robertson, Salah and Alisson. So Salah looked a lot sharper in game week 9. Probably should have had more than 8 points. He had a one-on-one chance that he put wide that last season it would have been in the back of the net, so it was disappointing to see that one trickle wide. Would have been a far healthier points tally, then he would have got bonus points as well. So I'm hopeful that brings me nicely into captaincy for game week 10. Salah's going to be my captain game week 10. It's a no-brainer. I had a quick look at the poll on Fantasy Football Scout today. Salah's on 50% and Hazard's got about 20%. So it's between those two really for Game Week 10 captaincy. There's talk that Hazard is carrying a bit of a knock. There was pictures of him holding his back before the United game. I know people are saying he picked up an injury in the United game, but it seems to be that he was carrying that before the game. So he'll miss the Europa League, I'm sure, this week, but I fully expect him to play against Burnley. But if you own Salah, I think he is the obvious captaincy option against Cardiff. If you don't, Hazard is a very good option against Burnley. Burnley have been very poor this season. They got hammered by Man City at the weekend, so I think Hazard is a viable captaincy option this week. Moving on to my transfer thoughts now for game week 10. Now it's only Tuesday, so I haven't given it too much thought yet. Knockaert is the problem now for me. He's the one I want to get rid of because he's a rotation risk, and I don't like rotation risks, so I want to get rid of him soon, and I probably will do it this week. I could bank this week, which is always an option, but I don't think I will. The big question I have to answer, the big question I have to ask myself this week is whether I want to move to 4 premium defenders. So what I've been looking at is moving to a 4-4-2. So what that would involve would be getting rid of Knockaert this week for somebody like Kennedy or Josh Murphy. And then next week it would be a -4. So it would be getting rid of Bennett and Danny Ings and bringing in Mendy and someone like Success up front, just as someone who doesn't play as a bench striker. So that would be a move to a 4-4-2, and it would take a -4 to get there, but then it would give me Robertson, Trippier, Mendy and Alonso as a back 4, which could serve me well between now and Christmas time. But I just don't know how I feel about moving to 4 at the back. It leaves me. My squad will be very inflexible then. I'll probably have to have 2 very cheap midfielders. So I've got Danny Ward, and I'll be bringing in someone like Murphy or Kennedy. So 2 sub 5 million midfielders, which I don't really like. It could create problems down the line if I get injuries and things like that. The other option I'm looking at, rather than going for the 4-4-2, is just sticking to 3-4-3. So what I would do then would be, this week I would get rid of Knockaert for someone like Pereira or Schürrle. And then for game week 11, I would maybe look at getting rid of Trippier for Mendy. So that would just leave it as a 3-4-3. But that would mean keeping Danny Ings. So a lot kind of depends on what Danny Ings does against Newcastle. Because I am losing patience with Danny Ings. But if he can do the business for me against Newcastle this weekend, it'll probably get him a stay of execution, because he does have Man City after that, which is not ideal. But then he has Watford and Fulham, so he could do well in those two fixtures. But so basically, I'm undecided. Do I go for 4-4-2, which leaves me pretty committed to that formation, and I don't have much flexibility. Then it also would give me a very weak bench. So I'd have Success, I would have Danny Ward and Wan-Bissaka, and ideally I'd probably want to have a stronger bench than that. So more than likely, what I'll do is I'll just stick to 3-4-3, sell Knockaert this week, and then get Mendy in for Trippier game week 11. So that's probably what I will do. I mentioned Kennedy there. I didn't mention him in my watch list or anything like that. He's the Newcastle player I like because he's cheap. He's 4.9 million. I had a quick look at the stats today from game week 9, and he was top for midfielders for goal attempts game week 9. I think he had 8 goal attempts game week 9, which is a good sign. And I think he's a player who's been underperforming this season. Newcastle have been underperforming as well. So Newcastle have a superb fixture on it. I don't think they face a top 6 side until Boxing Day. So this upturn in fixtures could see an upturn in form for Newcastle. And if there is an upturn in form, I would expect Kennedy to be in the FPL points. So that's why I've got my eye on him. So I'll compare Kennedy and Josh Murphy this week. I'll look at the stats and things like that and see which one I prefer. Or else, if I'm not going to go 4-4-2, it'll be Knockaert to someone more expensive. So it'll probably be Pereira or Schürrle. So again, I'll compare those two stats wise and fixtures and things like that and decide which one I want to go for. So that's a bit of insight to how I'm thinking transfer wise for game week 10. So lots of thinking to do, and Champions League and Europa League could obviously change my thinking. If someone was to pick up an injury, especially one of the big defenders, that could change my plans. So I won't be making any transfers until Friday. I do that most weeks. I just like to have all the information at hand and then make the best informed decision. So just a couple of little things I want to mention before I wrap it up. First of all, I want to give a shout out to my patrons. So 7 of my patrons are in the top 1k overall. So I'd like to think that the Slack channel we have and the content I'm putting out there has played a part in that, and it's great to see some of those guys absolutely flying. And if I don't win FPL this season, I hope that one of my patrons does. One of them is actually, I think he's 33rd overall. I think another guy is around 70th. So great to see that. If you want to join our Slack community where we talk FPL on a daily basis, you'll find a link to my Patreon on my Twitter page. So we have a Slack community, and I do live streams every Friday as well. Any questions you have, just send me a DM or an email. Something else I wanted to mention was the fundraiser I did for CAM, so the charity CAM, who do great work for guys who are struggling with their mental health. So I set up the fundraiser mini league about 3 weeks ago, and as a community we've managed to raise over £2,500, so absolutely superb. I set a target of £1,000, which I thought we would raise between now and the end of the season, so I completely smashed that target. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's donated to that league, and to the charity. And be sure to check out Cam if you are struggling with your mental health. As I said before, my DMs are always open. If you want to talk to a stranger, if you can't talk to your family or friends, just send me a message and we can open up a dialogue. I did a mental health podcast during the break as well with the guys at Fantasy Football Surgery. So if you didn't hear that one, check out the Twitter account at Find Extra Time and you'll find that podcast there. It's well worth a listen. Just a couple of guys talking openly about our mental health. So hopefully it helps a few other guys to talk about their mental health as well. The last thing I want to mention is I will be on YouTube on Thursday night this week on FPL Wildcats. So some really good YouTubers there. So I'll be joining them this week to talk about Game Week 10. So be sure to check that one out. I'm not sure yet what time it is on Thursday, but I'll put a link on Twitter on Thursday and let you know. So be sure to tune into that one. You can follow them on Twitter at FPL Wildcats as well. So all I'm left to say is enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the Champions League games. Be patient with those transfers. And good luck in Game Week 10. So any feedback as well you have about this podcast, let me know what you think of it. All feedback's welcome, positive and negative. Always looking to improve things. So just leave a comment anywhere, whether you're on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, wherever. I see all the comments, or just send me a tweet. Let me know what you thought of it. Was it better the way it was before? With the different features, or did you enjoy this one better? So just let me know what you think, and I'll take all that on board for next week's episode. So I'll be back next Tuesday with episode 18. Thanks for listening, folks.